So welcome to Sebring International Raceway. It's a little bit dark now, but if you don't know, this is an incredibly famous racing circuit. Obviously, the 12 Hours of Sebring is a national staple in this country, but this track also hosted the very first United States Grand Prix for Formula One in 1959. In recent years, this has been one of the best values in racing and one of the most underrated values in racing. Super Sebring. 12 hours on Saturday, which is the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship, and 8 hours on Friday for the FIA World Endurance Championship. Of course, that's tomorrow, and we'll have full coverage of that event tomorrow. Of course, that'll also be WeatherTech qualifying, and we'll be talking about that. Should have a few drivers to interview. We got a few drivers that we interviewed today, particularly on the World Endurance Championship side of things. So, how do things stack up for tomorrow's World Endurance Championship 1,000 miles of Sebring? Well, there are 4 classes of competition. There's LM Hypercar, formerly LMP1. Then you've got LMP2, you've got GTE Pro, and GTE M. These are the cars that you may remember as the GT Le Mans cars last year. Overall is really kind of the interesting part for me, because you have essentially a 5-car race with the hypercar category, which features the French Alpine, the 2 Japanese Toyotas, and the all-American Scuderia Cameron Glickenhaus. The Alpine took the pole today, and the Glickenhaus is on the outside. So American hopefuls, if you want an American, at least funded car, I don't know if it's necessarily built by Americans, but it's an American team, American funding from Texan James Glickenhaus. So it's kind of like a chaparral, I guess, or a modern interpretation of that on the outside. The Toyotas have been having some problems. The Toyotas actually have been not super far down, but in fact, the Toyotas, at least one of them qualified overall behind a couple of LMP2 cars. So there's quite an interesting race forming here for the World Endurance Championship, 1,000 miles of Sebring tomorrow. So what was really nice was that even though it's an FIA race and there's a certain stigma about them, I suppose, I have to tell you that they've really been good to the media, and particularly the American media. And so I had the opportunity to speak to a bunch of drivers from the World Endurance Championship and ask them about what to expect tomorrow. I think you're going to be surprised with some of the names I was able to pull.
Qualifying was going pretty well. First set we were 6/10 quicker than any of the opposition. Unfortunately, we went out very late for our second lap and got caught by a red flag at the end, but I guess that's the nature of when you go aggressive. But we're certainly in the mix, and it's going to be a long race tomorrow when it's 8 hours in this heat, which seems quite intense.
What is it like with the hypercars this year? It seems like the gap is so close between LMP2 and the hypercars. Are you really expecting that to be quite a mix-up, and are you expecting to do pretty well overall, speaking?
What I don't understand is they slowed up P2 again for the second year. They slowed them up last year. They were behind hypercar, whereas they're even slower again by a good step, and they're still in amongst the hypercars. So I know there's some different weights and the balance of performance out there, but they're going to have to unleash them a little bit to let them go, because there should be a distinct pace advantage between each class, and we're even struggling at some points to pass the GT cars where P2 is. So, but I guess that's what the ACO need to see, and the FIA when you're at a race like this, where it's all about. And I'm certainly going to be racing the hypercar later in the year, so I'll see both aspects of it. But at the moment, concentrating on what we can do, and we're certainly not in the race to fight for that, but we're in the race to try and fight for the winning P2.
I'm feeling great. Sebring is a track that I didn't know. This is my first time, and I'm really enjoying it. It has a lot of personality with the bumps. Also the track characteristics and the track layout is just very different to anything else I've driven. So I'm enjoying it. We've struggled a bit with the car over the whole prologue, the test, and now into the weekend. But we're trying our best to make it as smooth as possible, mainly for the race.
Obviously, you guys are going to be starting on the back foot. Your car crashed in qualifying. Have you dealt with that sort of a situation before, where you've had a car crash before the race and not really knowing what to expect when you get in for the first time?
Yes, unfortunately my teammate had a crash in qualifying, but right now we just focus on getting the car back together, getting it ready for the race, and putting all our focus on the race. I mean, as we all know, it's an 8-hour race. It's a long race. This will be my first endurance race, so I'm really looking forward to it.
And certainly it seems like it's going to be very intense traffic-wise. I mean, this is a narrow track, and it seems like the performance gap between you guys and the hypercars is way closer than maybe we even expected going in. What is that like to race against those hypercars? Because they've got to be making their lap time in different places than you are.
Yes, it's true. I had a run in practice, and I was trying to cope with the traffic, also with the hypercars coming behind with a lot of power, but at the same time it's not very straightforward, so you really need to find the right spots to overtake the GTs and the right places as well to fight with the hypercars, because at the end of the day you're trying to lose the least time possible and get into the competition, basically.
You mentioned it was your first endurance race. I got to ask you this, because you're a single-seater guy, IndyCar, Formula One. What's it like to share a car, and certainly looking at it now where you weren't in the car but your car got crashed? I mean, how do you feel? How does that make you feel?
Well, it's a very different sensation, because all you're trying to do is to get the best out of the whole team, work with your teammates, make sure the car is on a good place, not only for one driver, not only for myself, but also for my teammates. So it's been quite an experience. I mean, unfortunately, Alex Brundle, who we started testing, he had COVID and he had to step out of the race, and then Fabio came in. So there's been a bit of a mix over the whole week here in Sebring, but hopefully tomorrow will be a lot smoother and we just get on with the race and have a consistent run.
Giancarlo Fisichella, tell me a little bit about what you like about Sebring. I know it's a very different experience racing here than a lot of the tracks you're used to in Europe.
Well, first of all, I like the track. Even if you have to respect the bumps, it's an amazing track. It's a very challenging circuit, especially turn 1, turn 17, where you need to be confident and comfortable in the car. And but in the same time, you need to be quick. You need to brake very late and go on the curbs with the maximum speed. I like the atmosphere. I like the people over here. It's an amazing atmosphere. So I really like this kind of place. I really like to race in America. I used to be here in the IMSA Championship. I got great memories. So I'm happy to be here again.
So obviously the GTE field is a lot smaller than we've been used to in previous years. Does that change your approach to the race with so few cars versus a bigger field?
Well, in our category, I'm racing with a GTA. We are 12 plus 5 Pro, so it's not too bad. It's not too bad. As usual, you need to find a good compromise with your teammates, the right setup for everybody. Once you find it, I think it's possible to score a good result.
Traffic, I've talked to everybody about this. The traffic seems to be a real big topic of conversation, particularly the fact that the LMP2s and the hypercars seem to be really, really close, and they've got to be really aggressive, because in some ways the LMP2s are slower than you guys on the straightaways. As a GT driver, how are you able to handle the prototypes when they are really trying to make up time in the corners versus you?
Yeah, it's not easy to manage it because obviously we are pushing a lot, and even them, they are quicker than us, but not so much quicker than us, especially somewhere in the slow speed corners they struggling a little bit. So we try to keep them behind in the braking point, and then at the exit of the corner, when there is a straight line, we give them the way to pass us.
Dane Cameron, Team Penske, it's great to see you guys here in the World Endurance Championship. Obviously, you guys are preparing for next year. You guys weren't spectacular in qualifying. What was the difference today?
Yeah, we're still coming to grips with this package. We've only run it 2 days outside of this weekend, so we just don't fully have the grasp on it that we really want. We were struggling a little bit through the balance throughout the week. I thought we made some steps in the right direction there in qualifying, but yeah, still a little bit bigger of a gap than we would have hoped for. We were kind of thinking if everything was not perfect, but just better, we'd be kind of 5 to 8th, and we were 8th or 9th or whatever. So we were a little bit off of kind of what we had hoped for. But yeah, we're just still really coming to grips with the package. It's very different from what we used to run in IMSA, tire-wise, downforce-wise. Some things are not even open on this car that we could kind of get into before in the other ones. So yeah, just coming to grips with the package really for the most part.
And that's right. You mentioned that. The DPIs really had a great separation from the LMP2 cars. That's not the case here in World Endurance Championship. It seems like the gaps between not only the LMP2s and the GTs, but the LMP2s and the hypercars are extremely close. How do you have to manage that as a driver over 8 hours and 1,000 miles tomorrow?
Yeah, it's a very different way of going racing. Obviously, even just the simple things from the way the safety cars work and the FCYs. So you don't kind of get that chance to catch back up like you do in IMSA. So it's, I think, definitely going to be flat out the entire way through. You can't afford to lose those spaces. I think traffic is a little more difficult, as you say. The categories are a little bit closer together. So we'll see. I think it takes a really tidy day, and as well, the tire rules are very different. And in IMSA, you pretty much just chuck tires at the thing all day, and you always got good stuff. So here, you're very, very limited. So you're going to have to go a lot higher mileage. You're going to have to be a lot stronger on the long run over the distance. So we've been trying to get prepared as best as we can, but it's a lot of work to do in a short amount of time. And we want to be more competitive. We expect to be more competitive, but at the same time, we're, trying to walk before we can run here a little bit.
You mentioned tires. Obviously, you run on Michelin-controlled tires in IMSA, Goodyear-controlled tires here. For someone who hasn't driven a race car, what is the difference between the Michelin tire and the Goodyear tire?
Yeah, we're still trying to figure that one out, to be fair. I think that's some of the problem. As well, we have the tire heaters here, so the tires come onto the car hot straight away. That's another difference. So just getting your pressures right is a little more challenging, a little different, in the way that goes. So this tire seems to be a little bit harder compound, a little harder wearing. So as well, the biggest thing is honestly the downforce is much, much less than it is in DPI. So you're a little bit more dependent on the mechanical side of the car, and the mechanical side of the car is different and more limited than what we used to have. So we're not able to use some of the tricks and tools that we had before in IMSA. So we got a great bunch of guys, a lot of the same people we worked with on that program. So we'll find our way here soon.
And I guess since we're here at the World Endurance Championship race and really looking ahead to the future, how excited are you to get behind the wheel of the Porsche? Possibly here and possibly in IMSA, that car can go both places, and especially how Team Penske's kind of feeling about that opportunity.
Yeah, I think everyone's massively excited about it. If you've seen Mr. Penske in the last couple of weeks or months, you know how excited he is about it. He's definitely got a spring in his step for that program. So it's hugely exciting. I think it's a hugely exciting time for sports car racing globally, to see this category come together, to see some, hopefully what can be a long-term convergence across these two organizations come together is huge. I think we're going to see prototype fields like we've never seen and haven't seen in decades. So I think anybody who's a sports car fan or even a motorsport fan, I think has a lot to look forward to. We're certainly excited about it. We hope to be, fighting at the front for wins with this project, around the world.
And you mentioned Roger being excited about sports car racing. I have to ask you, and I know you probably won't be able to answer this, but I think Roger's real set on having a race in his backyard. Would you be open to racing at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway sometime in a sports car?
Yeah, I mean, who wouldn't? I have raced there before in what was Grand Am and Intercontinental as well. So it's one of those kind of special places that just got a little extra shine on it. I think everybody wants to win there. So whichever category chooses to go there, I think everyone, if you have a chance to race at Indianapolis, you want to, and certainly you want a chance to win there and kiss the brakes, do the whole deal with that great new podium that he's got there. So we'll see what happens. I'm sure he's pushing for something. There's one thing for sure about Roger, he's 10 steps ahead of everybody else.
Yeah, and just for the record, I really made an oopsie with Giancarlo Fisichella. When he walked up, I called him Jimmy Bruni, and then he made fun of me to none other than Robert Kubica. Well, I have that on my life now that I can say that happened to me. But I think tomorrow is going to be a really interesting race in terms of the World Endurance Championship. I'm so fascinated to see if Alpine, which is on the pole, and of course Glickenhaus on the outside, if they can maintain pace and if they can stay reliable and if they can stay out of trouble. And if Toyota really is as bad as they think they are. One of the big things that I've heard, and this has been reported by Sports Car 365, is that the hybrid boost on the Toyota is different than it has been in the past, in which that it used to activate at 120 kilometers per hour, and now it activates at 190 kilometers per hour on acceleration. Well, there's only one corner, it's the one right behind me, where you're actually going 190 kilometers per hour after slowing down. So essentially, in a lot of ways, apparently the Toyota's been running essentially full laps without any hybrid boost. So really, they're on very much an even keel with the Alpine and the Glickenhaus. So I think it's going to be really, and then you got to factor in the LMP2 cars. Now, you did hear a few of the drivers kind of poo-poo the idea that an LMP2 car could compete for the overall win here, but I think there's a real strong possibility that we could eventually see that. Finally, I guess we'll talk about IMSA a little bit. They did quite a bit of practice today. Certainly, the interesting part about DPI has been that the 48 Action Express car is here, but two of the drivers are running in the World Endurance Championship. So actually, it's been a one-driver show so far. It will change with Mike Rockenfeller doing all of the driving duties for that team. Chip Ganassi Racing has had to make several driver swaps. Sebastian Bourdais and Ryan Hunter-Reay have been fast. Ryan Hunter-Reay won here in the Mazda, so you know he's quick. And I guess we'll talk a little bit about the GT battle. It's interesting because we've got an extra BMW for this race and the rest of the season, really. Paul Miller Racing, #1 car. They were not able to be ready for Daytona. They are here, and the BMWs are much quicker. I don't know if it has anything to do with having an extra car, but the BMWs are quick. Corvette in GT still looks like they're struggling. The big factor that we heard about at Daytona and seems to continue to be a factor here has been the Michelin control tire that they don't use in the World Endurance Championship, which of course Corvette is splitting their fortunes this weekend between GTE Pro in World Endurance Championship and GTD Pro in IMSA. Confusing enough for you? Well, it is sports car racing. So tomorrow, big day. This weekend, a big weekend, I guess you could say. Certainly the NASCAR announcement, you guys have already seen the video on that. My comments with Pierre Fillon of the ACO and John Doonan of IMSA, despite the fact that I didn't have this light on the camera, so it looks like crap, but the information is still very good. So, thank you guys so much for watching. We'll be back here bright and early tomorrow with more coverage from Super Sebring. Thank you guys so much for watching, and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video.